Now we will start to write our functions which will operate over our data. We will write basic functions which are not connected to our structures. Our first function will not have inputs and we will have one variable as output. First, we will write reserved word func, then we will specify name for that function. Then, because we don't have input inside of this function, we will write empty brackets. After empty brackets, we will specify which data type we are expecting from our function. In this case, that will be string data type. After our declaration, we will open block in which we will write our code. So in this case, we must return value with data type string. We can write specific implementation, but in this case, we won't do that. We just want to return specific value as data type string. So we will write reserved word return, and then we will write specific value as data type string. This value, because it's string, it must be under quotes. And we finished our first function. Let's create function where we will have both input and output. In this case, our function will have name system message 2. We have input, so our first brackets won't be empty. Inside of our brackets, we will specify input, one variable, which we will send to our function. We will write alias for that specific variable. So in this case, we want to assign name to that variable, and alias for that variable will be name. Then we will specify data type for that alias. We are expecting from our function one value of data type string. After our brackets, we will type string and then we will open our block. Here, as a return, we will write sprintf function from our fmt package. This function will help us to return a specific value from specific format. As first value of our sprintf function, we will write format which we want to use, like we print printf function, and that format can look like this. After that, we will pass specific variable which we want to map on place where we wrote %v attribute. So in this case, we want to pass our input variable, and for that we will use alias name of our input variable. Now, in final picture, what we got here, we will send one variable as data type string to our function, and then that function will take our input variable and put on place inside of our sprintf function. And after that, our function will return us specific format as value string. Now we want to write function with one input, but this function won't have the output. In our function system_message3, we have one variable as input value, and after our brackets, we can see that we didn't specify any values, which means that we are not expecting anything from our function. In this case, this function will just operate over some data, and at the end, it won't send us anything as return. So in this case, system_message3 function will just print for us specific message. Also, that message will be printed as printf function, and to that function we will pass variable from our input, which means that we will pass our name alias to our printf function. Let's now create function in which we will operate over our input. In our new function multiply, we will have input as data type integer, and alias for that variable will be x. Also, we are expecting from our function after execution to bring us one specific value of a data type integer. First, we will write new variable with name result. Then we want to use our input variable to multiply that number with himself. Then, after we multiply our x variable, we want to return our output variable as data type integer. In our return, we will pass our variable result. So in this case, we are not passing specific value, we are passing value of specific variable. Data type of our result variable will be also integer, so in this case, we are returning value of our result variable. We understood how we can create our basic functions. Next step will be that we want to create new variables from output of our functions. So let's now see how we can call specific function. First, inside of our main function, we will create new variable result 0. Then, instead of assigning new specific value, we will call our function. How we can call specific function? We will just type name which we assigned in our declaration of specific function. So in this case, we want to call multiply function. We can see that this function have one input variable. That input variable must have data type integer. We want to pass number 3 to our function. What will be value of our result 0? We called our multiply function and we passed the value 3 inside of our function. Then on line 15 we multiply x with x and then we return result as value of our result variable. Output of this multiply function will be 9. That is exactly the same value which will be assigned to our result 0 variable. So now when we print result 0 variable, we will see output as value 9. Also, we can call our multiply function inside of our println function. Our println function will print for us value 16 because in this case we pass number 4 to our multiply function. We can also call multiple functions at the same time and assign output of them to specific new variables. We will assign output of our multiply function with input value 5 to our result1 variable. Next, we will assign output of our system message 1 function to our result2 variable. And last, we will assign output of our system message 2 function to our result3 variable. When we print these 3 new variables, output will look like this. We want to call system message 3 function. We can see that we have one input variable, but we don't have the output. We must know one important thing. We can't assign function to specific variable as new value if that function doesn't have output. So what we will do in this case? We will just call that function with specific input. In this case, we only see declaration of our function, but on the left side of our function, we don't see any new variable because this function doesn't have output, and in this case, we are not expecting any value from this function. This function at the end will print only one specific message. Now you can execute our application to see all the outputs from our calls of our new functions. Let's now see more practical examples. We will create two new functions where first function won't have any inputs and outputs, and second function will have multiple inputs and multiple outputs. In a system message 4 function, we don't have any inputs and we are also not expecting anything from our function. So in this case, this function will just print message as value system is going offline. We want to create new function with name price, where this function will have two input variables as data type float 32, and we are expecting from our function price two different values, where first value will have data type float 32 and second value will have data type string. We can see that our two values inside of our input are declared both as float 32. When we separate alias for our variables inside of our input only with comma, that means that all our input variables will have one specific data type which we assigned after last alias. So in this case, our x and y variables will have both float 32 data type. Inside of this function, we want to multiply these two variables, and then we want to return specific result. Also, beside of that result, we want to return specific message as data type string. We will create new variable price by assigning new value when we multiply our two variables from our input. Then we will check if value of that price variable is higher than 500. In that case, for first value inside of our output, we will return value of our variable price, but message as data type string for our second variable inside of our output will be that price is higher than expected. Then we will write our else block. If first condition fail, then we will enter into our else block. In this case, we will also return value of our price variable, but for second variable inside of our output, the message will be different. Message will be that price is lower than expected. After this block, we will specify one more return as our default state for our output. Inside of our main function, we want to call these two functions. For first case, when we call our system message for function, we won't have inputs and we won't have outputs, which means that we only can call this function. Also, we cannot assign this function to new variable. Now we want to call our price function. We can see that output of this function have two different values. We will create two new variables because we are expecting two different values. In this case, we want to create result1 and message variables. New values of these variables will be values which we are expecting from our price function. Then we will call our price function, and now we must pass two different values, and both of these values must have data type float 32. Now we want to check one thing. If value of result1 variable isn't equal with 0.0, or our message variable isn't equal with empty string, then in that case we will print values of both of our variables. We can call these functions as many times as we want. Let's create another call of our price function with new values. We have a new variables result2 and message2, and new values of these variables will be values which we are expecting from our price function. So in this case, we will also get result from our function, but now message is different. Value of our result2 variable is less than 500. Our println function will print for us result2 variable, but now message is different. Value of our message2 variable is now value of data type string, which tells us that price is lower than expected. And now we understood how we can get multiple values from our function, where we have multiple values for input and multiple values for our output for specific function. In the next video, we will see another example of this implementation, and we will see how we can connect specific function with specific structure.